My name is Sophia Johnson, and I'm 30. For as long as I can remember, I've been the invisible backbone of my family, the quiet fixer, the one who pays the bills nobody notices, who steps in when emergencies strike, who sacrifices everything so everyone else can breathe. And yet, despite decades of doing the heavy lifting, I was always the kid who could step over, the one who would quietly absorb the chaos and smile. I grew up 10 minutes from my parents' small brick house, a place that smelled of old carpet and disappointment. My younger sister, Emma, was the kind of person who fit effortlessly into every room, always smiling, always charming, always taking more than her share. And my dad? He never saw the years I poured into supporting them. He only saw the convenience of my wallet. For 6 years, I paid Emma's student loans when she dropped out twice. I wired my mom money when her card got skimmed, or when she claimed refunds were delayed. I paid taxes on their house 3 times without a word. I covered Emma's car insurance after she crashed. Twice. And through all of it, I was silent, invisible, the safety net, until the day I bought my own house. A $760,000 house, a house I worked for, saved for, and finally called mine. And that's when the cracks began to show. The day of the family reunion, I walked into my living room, a bottle of red in hand, expecting a quiet celebration. And there she was, Emma, barefoot in my living room, heels tossed by the fireplace, smirking like she owned every inch of the place. "Dad promised this as my wedding gift," she said. Her voice bounced off the high ceilings, echoing entitlement. "You really think this is your place?" I didn't answer. I just tightened my fingers around the neck of the bottle. Then I calmly pulled out the deed, the proof that this house was mine, and set it on the kitchen island. My father walked in behind her, eyes flicking from me to Emma. He passed me as if I were air. "You brought money," he said, almost approvingly. "But you don't belong here." No hug, no welcome. Just a reminder that all my years of effort, all my sacrifices, were invisible to them. I stared at them for a moment. Then, without drama, I opened my phone and sent a single message to the family chat. It sold. Emma's smirk vanished. Her face drained of color as she looked around my kitchen, my floors, my fireplace, everything I had built with my own money. "You're lying," she whispered, disbelief trembling in her voice. I didn't respond. She didn't know that the deed had been signed yesterday, that escrow had closed hours ago. But it didn't matter. This wasn't about the house. It was about respect, recognition, and finally stepping out of the shadow of being the giver who could be ignored. I remembered every invisible debt I had covered for them, every financial favor they treated as a right. Emma's social media posts flaunting stolen moments from my wallet, the GoFundMe she created for a family dream home, raking in thousands from relatives, all while I silently supported her. The emails she rewrote to make me appear selfish, the texts she altered to paint me as cruel. For years, I had let it slide. I thought maybe one day they'd see me. That maybe, just maybe, they'd understand that love isn't measured in favors or money. It's measured in respect. But that day never came. Not for me. Not for the quiet one. And now finally it did. I turned to the window, watching them leave as though the air itself could erase me. I didn't feel anger. I felt freedom, a freedom I hadn't known I deserved. This confrontation wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Even my boyfriend, Zach, had sensed the tension. He knew Emma's manipulations better than anyone, and I could feel his calm support even in his absence, like a quiet anchor in the storm of family chaos. I didn't need him to fight for me. I needed him to witness, and he did. As I cleaned the kitchen later that evening, I replayed everything in my head. The smirk, the dismissal, the sense of entitlement that my family had carried for decades. I thought about all the times I had been invisible, and I realized something crucial. Invisibility had its advantage. I could see clearly what they could not. I could plan, wait, and strike when the moment was right. This was the start of something larger, something calculated. Because when a family takes you for granted for years, underestimates your patience, and assumes that loyalty means submission, the quiet ones, like me, become the storm. And I was ready. After the reunion debacle, I realized that the fight for respect had only just begun. Emma's smirk, my father's dismissive glance, they weren't just personality flaws. They were symptoms of a system built on lies, manipulation, and entitlement. I knew I had to understand the full scope before taking any further action. I started digging. Emma had always bragged about backing up her devices, insisting she never deleted anything. Years ago, I had helped her migrate laptops, transferred files, organized her folders. I remembered the old hard drive she left behind in my storage unit. It had seemed like junk at the time. Selfies, random PDFs, folders labeled with hashtags like Bridesmaid Inspo Final V3. But now it was a goldmine. Plugging the hard drive in, I sifted through the clutter, patience sharpened like a blade. At first, it was just harmless junk. But then I stumbled on a folder named Family Docs. Inside were screenshots, emails, and voice memos, edited, manipulated, and stitched together to make me appear aggressive, vindictive, even dangerous. There were text chains that never existed, emails rewritten to twist my words into insults, and voice recordings chopped into fragments, spliced together to form threats I had never made. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it sink in. Emma had built a digital fortress of lies. For years, she had meticulously prepared for something I hadn't even anticipated, and for once, I allowed myself a quiet, simmering thrill. If she was building a case, I could counter it. I copied everything, screenshots, voice memos, altered messages, into my own secure folder. I checked timestamps. Some were from dates I was out of the country. Some were from moments I had trusted her to be honest. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal was laid bare. The next step was strategy. I had learned early that patience was power. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I cataloged everything. I created a timeline, noting when each deception occurred, how it had been deployed, and which family members had been drawn into her schemes. My mind ran like clockwork, calculating every potential move. And then came the whispers, a tip from an old family friend. My father had been showing people around my house, claiming he intended to gift it to Emma. That was 3 nights before the reunion. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just entitlement. This was the plan in motion. I called the realtor who had helped me purchase the home. Calmly, almost casually, I said 4 words I never imagined saying aloud. Let's list the house. I watched as Emma and my parents arrived that day, dressed as though the house was already theirs. Emma in ivory and pearls, my mom in some floral nightmare, my dad in a blazer meant to convey power. They stepped through the marble entryway, expecting triumph, and I let them believe it for a few precious moments. The irony was delicious. They thought they controlled the narrative. They didn't know that the final act was already set. I also called Zach. He arrived quietly, calm, a reminder that while my family thrived on chaos, my life had anchors, stability, and truth. I showed him a fraction of what I'd discovered, not for him to act, but for him to witness. His steady presence made the weight of the upcoming confrontation almost manageable. In the days leading up to the reunion, I pieced together everything. Emma's social media manipulations, the GoFundMe she launched under the guise of family dreams, screenshots of conversations where she rewrote history to make me appear the villain. Each layer of deception fueled a singular resolve. I wasn't just going to defend my home, I was going to expose the entire illusion she had spun for years. I remembered the small moments that stung the most, the times I had sent her money, the gratitude that never came, the times I covered for my parents, quietly absorbing their chaos, the way Emma's public posts flaunted my contributions as if they were trivial, and I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for my identity, my right to exist in the world as someone who mattered, not as a shadow, not as a backup plan. I prepared my own files, my own narrative, digital evidence, printed timelines, voice memos, all cataloged and verified. Each document was a weapon, but not one forged in anger. This was precision, strategy, and truth. And as the reunion approached, a quiet, almost predatory excitement settled over me. The family believed they held all the cards. They were about to learn that the quiet one, the invisible one, was the only one who could truly play the game. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about exposure, acknowledgement, and reclaiming the years I had given without recognition. Emma's lies, my parents' dismissals, the sense of being invisible, it all ended here. I closed my laptop, feeling the weight of the upcoming confrontation. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid. because patience had a payoff, because I had proof, and because finally I was ready. The day of the reunion arrived, and my heart was unnervingly calm. I had prepared everything. The house listed, my evidence organized, Zach by my side. Emma and my parents believed they were walking into victory. They had no idea the stage had been set for their reckoning, not mine. The front door opened first for my father. He stepped inside, eyes scanning the marble floors, the hardwood, the kitchen island, the house he assumed would eventually belong to Emma. "So, this is it," he said, feigning casualness. "Well, better late than never. Just sign the transfer papers after the party, and we're square." I didn't answer. I let him linger in the illusion for a few moments longer. Then Emma stepped in, her smile wide, like a bride walking down the aisle. She paused mid-step, taking in the space she believed she would soon inherit. My mother followed, silent as ever, her eyes moving from me to the interior, as if observing some curious experiment. The doorbell rang. Zach had been waiting quietly in the background, and now he stepped forward. Behind him was the last person they expected, Lila, Emma's ex-girlfriend. The very woman Emma had humiliated, discarded, and tried to erase from her narrative. Lila walked in, carrying a folder, her presence calm but commanding. "What are you doing here?" Emma's voice cracked. "I think it's time the family sees the real Emma," Lila said, placing the folder on the kitchen island. I leaned on the counter, watching as my family's composure began to crumble. Inside the folder were screenshots, transcripts, printed timelines of messages, emails, and voice memos, all evidence of Emma's digital manipulations. Every lie, every fabricated threat, every distortion of the truth was meticulously documented. "Sit down," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. "It's time you see what's been happening behind your back." My father stepped toward the folder, scanning one page, then another, jaw tightening. My mother froze, eyes wide, realizing the magnitude of what had been hidden from them. Emma gasped, her confident smirk now replaced by panic. "This is a message Emma sent to Lila's boss," I explained, posing as a former girlfriend, trying to sabotage her career. "These screenshots, these emails, every single altered text. Proof that the narrative you built against me was false." Emma's face contorted. "You're making a scene," she screamed. "No," I said, steady. "I'm ending one." Zach stood beside me, silent but unwavering, a reminder that not all bonds are manipulative. The room was heavy with truth. Even my mother, usually the master of quiet approval, couldn't deny what lay before her. Then my grandfather entered. He hadn't spoken to us in over a year, but his eyes, sharp, piercing, unyielding, cut through the tension. He approached the island, glanced at the evidence, then at Emma. "You've always been your father's child," he said quietly, "and you've let him, and yourself, believe lies over loyalty." My father paled. Even he couldn't mask the shame. I slid a white envelope across the island. "This is the final transfer agreement," I said. "Signed, witnessed, closed yesterday. The house is sold. Full market value. No discount. No gift. No inheritance." Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. "You sold the house?" "Yes," I said, calm. "And now everything you thought was yours is no longer within your reach." The room was silent, heavy with realization. My family's carefully constructed assumptions had collapsed. I stepped back, letting them absorb the weight of truth. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply existed as someone who had spent years invisible, now fully present, fully seen, and fully untouchable. I didn't stay for the rest of the party. I didn't wait for other guests. I walked away, leaving them to face the consequences of their choices, the ruins of their entitlement. The house, once a symbol of conflict, now became a monument to my independence. Weeks passed. My phone stayed quiet. The calls from my mother, my father, even Emma, went unanswered. I booked a quiet hotel, taking 2 weeks for myself, walking through the city alone, drinking coffee on balconies, letting the silence wash over me. This was the first time I truly experienced freedom. I filed paperwork to open my own agency, small, discreet, specializing in property audits and financial protection for people vulnerable to family exploitation. No fanfare, no social media campaign, just quiet, precise work for people who, like me, had been used by the ones who claimed to love them. For the first time in years, I wasn't a backup plan. I wasn't the invisible one. I wasn't a tool for someone else's comfort. I was Sophia Johnson, owner of my destiny, a woman whose value was self-defined. One morning, I stopped at my usual coffee shop. As I stepped out, I saw my mother across the street. She froze, seeing me for the first time in months. I looked her directly in the eyes and walked past her as if she were a stranger. No anger, no words, just silence, the kind that finally carried peace. The apartment, the office, the life I had built, everything reflected me, nothing else. High ceilings, sunlight, furniture chosen with intention, no remnants of betrayal. On the office door, a silver plaque, "We don't work with family." And beneath it, smaller letters, "If you think I owe you, you were never family to begin with." I was no longer the child, the safety net, the invisible one. I was a woman who had spent years invisible, and now I was unchained. And for the first time, the silence wasn't punishment, it was liberation. 2 months after the confrontation, the world felt quieter, sharper, cleaner. No calls, no messages, just the hum of my own life, finally uninterrupted. For the first time in decades, my existence wasn't defined by the expectations, manipulations, or judgments of my family. I had reclaimed myself. The house was gone, sold at full market value. Emma, my parents, and their schemes were no longer tethered to my efforts, my finances, or my patience. They were left with their own illusions, and I watched from a distance, unmoved. I focused on building my agency, small but precise. A single office, clean lines, sunlight streaming through windows, no clutter, no ghosts. My clients were people who had been exploited, taken for granted, or used by family or partners. People who needed someone like me, quiet, calculating, and relentless in the pursuit of fairness. Zach remained my anchor. Not the hero who fought my battles, but the partner who witnessed them, who offered his presence and his calm. We worked together on the agency's launch, brainstorming, strategizing, laughing quietly over coffee in the office. His support was steady, patient, and unwavering. For once, I didn't have to fight alone. I received word that Emma was trying to rebuild, filing for housing, applying for favors, attempting minor manipulations here and there, but I didn't intervene. Her schemes could collapse under their own weight now. My responsibility ended where my boundaries began. Even my parents attempted subtle contact. My mother sent emails, leaving her voice small and hesitant. My father texted, claiming things were falling apart and implying I had destroyed the family. I didn't respond. I filed each message into a folder labeled "Their Burden Now." It was strange at first, the absence of their voices, the silence where guilt and obligation used to press down on me. But soon it became peaceful. I could walk without checking my phone, sleep without clenching my jaw, enjoy a cup of coffee without wondering who would demand something next. The silence wasn't lonely, it was freedom. One afternoon, a former colleague called. He had a client who needed property audits to protect against financial abuse. Another investor reached out, impressed by my meticulous work. And for the first time, I felt validated, not for giving, not for sacrificing, but for being competent, intelligent, and unmanipulated. I renamed the agency, registered a new LLC, closed every remaining shared account, and severed all digital ties to my old life. Everything connected to my family's entitlement was erased. I even changed my last name, not for drama, not for show, but to claim my identity as someone untethered, unbound, and unexploitable. The silver plaque over the office door gleamed in the morning light. "We don't work with family. If you think I owe you, you were never family to begin with." It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a declaration of vengeance. It was simply truth. Months later, I walked past my old neighborhood. My mother spotted me and froze. I looked at her for a brief second, a calm and unshakable presence, and walked past her as though she were a stranger. She said nothing, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. My apartment, my office, my life, everything reflected me, not the expectations or manipulations of others. High ceilings, sunlight, furniture chosen intentionally, no hand-me-downs, no shadows of betrayal, no family portraits cluttered the shelves, only my reflection, in full clarity, staring back at me. The house of cards my family had built. The manipulation, the entitlement, the invisible debts, they all collapsed the moment I stepped away. And I learned something vital. You can't miss what you never truly had. The love they gave wasn't love, it was leverage. And the second I refused to be their tool, the world tilted, revealing freedom where once there had only been invisible chains. I had been the invisible backbone for years. Now I was visible, unbreakable, and completely, finally, my own.